Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at our top stories. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle expressing doubts about the Afghanistan deadline. What do they have to say, and what reason does the Taliban give for blocking the road to the airport? Only one province remains in Afghanistan that's not under Taliban control. The people there have resisted foreign occupation for decades and say they don't plan to surrender anytime soon. The Remain in Mexico policy ordered to be reinstated. That's while Border Patrol agents arrest thousands of criminals illegally in the U.S. The House passes a bill strengthening a voting law passed in the civil rights era. This while the chamber approves a $3.5 trillion budget proposal, both moves completed on a Democrat party line vote. Lawmakers are doubtful that the U.S. can get everyone out of Afghanistan by the end of August. That's despite President Biden saying yesterday that they're on pace to meet the deadline. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are unhappy about the situation in Afghanistan.
This administration has horribly bungled the leaving of Afghanistan.
President Biden said Tuesday they're on pace to finish evacuations by August 31st, contingent on the Taliban's cooperation. But Republican Michael McCall doesn't believe it.
There's no way we can humanly get all of our American citizens and Afghan partners out of country by that time. People are going to die, and they're going to be left behind.
Democrat Seth Moulton says he and another lawmaker secretly visited the Kabul airport Tuesday. Both are military veterans and serve on the Armed Services Committee. Moulton tweets, "Washington should be ashamed of the position we put our service members in." He said after talking to commanders on the ground, it's obvious they won't get everyone out on time because of the late start. Moulton tweets, "Sadly and frustratingly, getting our people out depends on maintaining the current bizarre relationship with the Taliban." Multiple Americans telling news outlets they're stranded in Afghanistan, unable to reach the airport because of Taliban checkpoints. The White House asking reporters to forward their information.
If any of you are hearing from American citizens who can't reach us, give me their contact information and we will get in contact with them.
A Taliban spokesman says they blocked the road to the airport so Afghans can't get out. He says they need them to help rebuild the country.
Foreign nationals can use it, but domestic nationals cannot go this way because it is blocked.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights says she has credible reports that the Taliban is committing serious human rights violations in Afghanistan, including executions of civilians and former Afghan security forces. As of Tuesday, the administration says over 4,000 Americans and their families have been evacuated. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
The Taliban has taken over almost all of Afghanistan with little to no resistance. Now there's just one province left that's free from Taliban control. The leader in that northern province says he's open to negotiations, but his people remain ready to fight. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
The Taliban has taken over 3 northern districts in Afghanistan, but they are getting resistance from the Panjshir province. A video released on Sunday shows a Taliban convoy outside of Panjshir, the last of the country's 34 provinces not under Taliban control.
This is the Panjshir front line. Friends are coming. 4 hours is given to them. If they surrender, then good, and if not, then they will be punished.
The National Resistance Front, or NRF, is opposing Taliban rule. Their spokesman said on Sunday, "We are in favor of peace, but peace does not mean surrendering to the enemy's demands and one force to dominate the politics of the country." The Panjshir Valley has withstood foreign occupation for decades, and its landscape plays a role in its military success. The British Army was unable to penetrate the region during its attempt to take Afghanistan in the 19th century. In the 1980s, fighters defending the Panjshir Valley held Soviet forces at bay, even as the USSR controlled Kabul and other large portions of the country. And in 1996, when the Taliban took over most of Afghanistan, they were still unable to control this northern province. Ahmed Shah Massoud led the Northern Alliance Front, or NAF, in those battles against the Soviet Union and the Taliban. Later, in 2001, the NAF teamed up with U.S. forces to defeat the Taliban. Al-Qaeda assassinated Ahmed Shah Massoud in that same year. His son, Ahmed Massoud, is now the leader of the NRF, a coalition of Uzbek and Tajik forces.
I'm in my sanctuary. I'm in my stronghold, Panjshir Valley. The people of Panjshir Valley are very much united, and they want to defend, and they want to fight, and they want to resist against any totalitarian regime, against any belief that wants to enforce their own belief and ideology upon the people. The people in here are just a small portion of the people of Afghanistan. In the geography of Panjshir is the smallest province in the whole Afghanistan. But what we are standing for right now, it's for the whole country. It's for sovereignty, it's for peace, it's for people, it's for inclusivity and tolerance and acceptance and moderation.
He calls on Western nations for support as his troops continue to train in the province.
We are not fighting one province. We are defending the whole country in one province. That's what's happening. And we want to make Taliban realize that the only way forward is through negotiation and talk. And we are talking to them, and we do not want war to break out and to happen. And we want the Taliban to realize that these values that I just mentioned, it's more important than anything else, than any sort of military victory.
Masood says the mess in Afghanistan was caused by the U.S. Special Representative of Afghanistan Reconciliation, Zalmay Khalilzad, and the peace deal between the U.S. and the Taliban. He said he's ready to negotiate with the Taliban in hopes of having a more inclusive government, but he's always ready to defend his land. Jason Perry, NTD News.
2 weeks before the Taliban forces marched into Kabul this month, a former U.S. Army interpreter managed to get his mother and 2 siblings out of Afghanistan. But one of his sisters is still in Kabul. Here's more on what he's facing.
Hamadullah Ihsan is a former Afghan interpreter for the U.S. Army living in California, and he says he's prepared to do whatever it takes to get his sister out of Taliban-controlled Kabul, where she remains with her husband and infant child. Just one of the many Afghans who fear the Taliban will return to the harsh version of Islamic law enforced when the group was last in power 20 years ago.
I just want her to be safe out there. The Taliban, as I told you, they've never been changed. I cannot compare them to the animal. Animal is much better than them. I cannot compare them to any human being in the planet. They are more dangerous than anyone you think of that.
He says he saw what was coming and got his mother and 2 siblings out of Afghanistan just weeks before the Taliban marched into Kabul. They are now registered with the United Nations Refugee Agency in neighboring Tajikistan. He says he's put his sister on an evacuation list, but she hasn't been called by the US government to go to the airport. Ihsan worked with multiple army units in Kandahar from 2008 to 2012. He's been in California since 2015 on a special immigrant visa. In addition to his sister's safety and human rights, he fears reprisals against others like him that worked with the West, despite the Taliban's reassurances.
I have a lot of their videos. They're knocking people's door, asking for interpreter, asking for people that they're in the military, asking for all those people, and they're going to kill them. If I would be there now, of course they're gonna find me and they're gonna do something, but thanks God I'm here.
Data brokers are companies that collect and sell data for a variety of uses, but critics say the industry is ripe for abuse. According to a new report from Duke University, these companies risk national security by selling information on U.S. military personnel. Here's more.
At least 3 large companies are selling information on active duty U.S. military personnel. That's according to a Duke University report released on Monday. The study surveyed major data brokers in the United States, including LexisNexis, Axiom, and Nielsen. These companies typically buy and sell online information in bulk, used to promote legitimate businesses like credit scoring, advertising, and research. But critics say the data brokerage industry has become virtually unregulated. The Duke report cautioned that the data advertised by these brokers, spanning everything from financial transactions, histories, and internet browsing patterns to travel interests and support for political causes and organizations, could be used by foreign entities for a range of national security damaging activities. As detailed in the report, foreign powers may benefit by building profiles on senior U.S. military personnel involved in key decisions relevant to a foreign power, or even building profiles on their family members and close acquaintances, seeing as some data brokers openly and explicitly advertise their ability to map network connections between individuals. The Duke report follows recent revelations about how governments use bulk data for intelligence and espionage. In December, Foreign Policy magazine published findings on the Chinese regime's use of stolen U.S. datasets to expose CIA operatives.
President Biden will meet with business leaders in technology, banking, and academics today. Nearly 36 people will gather at the White House to talk about defending against cyber attacks. The summit comes after a wave of ransomware and other attacks on businesses and operators of critical infrastructure in the U.S. A senior administration official says the U.S. government and private organizations will make several announcements after the meeting. They will be focused on concrete steps to bolster the defense of the country's computer systems. The Supreme Court has ordered the Biden administration to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy. It comes as Border Patrol arrests almost 8,700 criminals who are in the country illegally, even though they don't have as much manpower as they need. The Trump-era policy that is to be reinstated requires people to wait in Mexico while their case to get asylum is heard. The Supreme Court said the Biden administration did not show that it wasn't acting hastily and without reason when it struck down the Remain in Mexico policy. The legal term is acting in an arbitrary and capricious manner. And now the High Court is citing its decision in 2020 not to strike down the DACA program for the same reason. Biden had suspended the Remain in Mexico policy in January, and the DHS officially terminated it in June. The move caused Texas and Missouri to file a lawsuit saying DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas did not provide justification for suspending it. All this while Border Patrol agents arrest nearly 8,700 criminals who entered the country illegally. Together, they have committed over 12,000 crimes. In August, agents arrested 2 MS-13 gang members. One was a convicted murderer from El Salvador who was taken into custody after illegally crossing the border near Mission, Texas. Most of these criminals are arrested while trying to evade Border Patrol, or they attempt to blend into large crowds crossing the border. But while agents are dealing with large groups, cartels take the opportunity to smuggle people and contraband through the areas nearby that officers aren't patrolling. Agents have told the Epoch Times that they are only arresting about 15% of all border crossers, though the number who have gone undetected or avoided capture is difficult to estimate. House Democrats passed a bill bolstering a civil rights-era voting law that the Supreme Court has weakened. This while the same group of lawmakers approved Senator Bernie Sanders' $3.5 trillion budget proposal.
The bill is passed.
The passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act received praise from President Biden. He said it would protect a sacred right to vote as Democrats approved the measure in a 219 to 212 vote, with all Republicans voting nay. Majority Leader Steny Hoyer is hopeful President Biden will have the chance to sign it.
It's a wonderful day. And John Lewis is saying to himself up there and saying to all of us, you kept your eye on the prize. And the prize was temporarily taken when we passed this bill. But the prize will be taken when Joe Biden signs this bill.
But the chances of it passing the Senate are slim. That's because Senate Republicans reject the bill as a power grab by Democrats and say it's unnecessary. The bill requires the Justice Department to challenge voting laws considered discriminatory. The DOJ would take action in states that have gotten a lot of violations regarding changes in voting laws. And the bill takes on the Supreme Court after it weakened the Civil Rights Act of 1965 twice in the last decade. The John Lewis bill combats gerrymandering, or manipulating voting districts, so that minorities can elect who they want to represent them. This while the House advances Senator Bernie Sanders' $3.5 billion budget proposal. It also passed in a party-line vote, with Republicans spending much of Tuesday's session asking Democrats to tackle the Afghanistan crisis first. Moderates in the House played a key role in its passage. They had refused to vote for the budget proposal before the infrastructure bill was passed. But through negotiations, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi agreed to pass the infrastructure bill by September 27th. The budget bill is likely to face challenges in the Senate because moderate Senator Joe Manchin has concerns about the bill's huge price tag.
House Republicans may have an edge in the midterm elections next year. A lot of factors are at play, and one of them has to do with incumbent Congress members who aren't seeking re-election. Here are the details.
8 House Democrats have decided either to retire or seek a different office ahead of next year's midterms. An equal number of House Republicans have decided to do the same. But according to political analysts, that will actually give Republicans an advantage. How? First, incumbents always start a re-election campaign with major advantages over challengers. And second, the House currently holds 222 Democrats and 213 Republicans. That means the GOP only needs a net gain of 5 seats to turn the chamber red. And third, the Democrats are retiring in swing districts, while the Republicans are leaving office in heavily GOP districts. According to analysis by election statistics website 538, 4 of the 8 retiring Democrats are in districts that lean slightly Republican. 3 of those 8 districts lean slightly Democrat, and only 1 is a heavily Democrat district. The 8 districts lean Democrat by only 1.3% on average. What's more, all 8 retiring GOP members serve in heavily Republican districts by 32% on average. The website is already sounding the alarm, calling it an ominous sign for Democrats. Veteran GOP congressional strategist Brian Darling tells the Epoch Times when you add up the factors of Republican-favored redistricting, Democrat retirements in swing districts, recent midterm voting trends, and the embarrassment of Afghanistan, there are going to be some strong headwinds that will make it likely that Republicans pick up far more than the 5 seats they need to take control of the House.
Football legend Herschel Walker has filed paperwork to enter the U.S. Senate race in Georgia. The Georgia governor gave his view of Walker's possible entry last month.
I mean, look, I love Herschel Walker. The guy's a Georgia icon. He's been a friend, still is, and a supporter of mine. I think he certainly could bring a lot of things to the table. But as others have mentioned, there's also, a lot of questions out there on that. I mean, I've been around Herschel a lot, and I know a lot of people that know Herschel very well, and he's just a great guy, and he's a damn good dog.
Walker signed papers Tuesday declaring his candidacy, allowing him to raise money for a Senate run. He also carries the backing of former President Donald Trump. The 59-year-old won a Heisman Trophy in 1982 when he was a University of Georgia running back. He also played in the NFL and in the short-lived United States Football League. President Trump appointed him to be co-chair of the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition in 2018. He joins other Republicans seeking the GOP nomination to challenge Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock in 2022. Israel's new prime minister arrived in Washington, D.C. Tuesday. He planned to press President Biden for a new Iran strategy and urge him not to revive the 2015 nuclear deal with Tehran. Biden's aides hope the talks will set a positive tone for his relationship with the new prime minister. Naftali Bennett is also a high-tech millionaire. He ended Benjamin Netanyahu's record 12-year run as prime minister in June. The talks are expected to be relatively low-key. The two leaders planned to speak briefly to a small pool of reporters in the Oval Office and had no plans to hold a joint news conference. Bennett is adamant about not letting Iran build a nuclear weapon. He said at a cabinet meeting on Sunday the situation was at a critical point. A new report shows China is still the primary source of fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances being trafficked into the United States. The report comes out of a congressional advisory body. The Chinese regime banned fentanyl in 2019, but the report says Chinese traffickers have found ways to circumvent regulations. Instead of sending the finished product abroad, they'll send unfinished fentanyl to Mexican cartels. The cartels will then finish producing the drug and traffic it into the United States. And Chinese money launderers will work with the cartels to aid drug money operations. The report says the Chinese regime's weak supervision and regulation of its chemical industry have enabled the illegal trade. Provisional data shows the United States saw a record number of 56,000 overdose deaths from synthetic opioids in 2020. That's a rise of 20,000 from 2019. Restoration work on the Washington National Cathedral is still underway. This comes years after an earthquake caused massive damage to the church. Restoration crews say the post-earthquake repairs may take another 10 years to complete. Here's more.
The Washington National Cathedral sustained major damage in August 2011 when a 5.8 magnitude earthquake rattled the mid-Atlantic. But a decade later, restoration crews say the repairs are not yet complete.
We estimated, and we're 10 years into the earthquake now, and we're about halfway done with the repairs.
The iconic Episcopal Church stands in northwest Washington, D.C. During the tremor, parts of the building's stonework cracked. Some features fell onto the roof, others tumbled to the ground below. The head stonemason says if the earthquake had lasted longer than 1 minute, the damage would have been greater.
All that energy traveling up so high, and of course, again, this is a Gothic structure with all these fine elements that you see here, all these spires and pinnacles, so that energy just kept going, and boom, it just popped, like the cracking of a whip. And that's why you see the damage is most extreme up high.
Rehabilitating the structure is a laborious and time-consuming process. Restored and remade features must be handmade in the same method the cathedral was built with. It may take another 10 years to repair all the damage. One of the most expensive projects left is to restore the height of the central tower.
One of our guiding principles here with the preservation and the restoration work we do is we're trying to save as much of the original material as possible. So if the piece is salvageable, we will repair it and put it back.
The restoration cost is estimated at over $30 million. The National Cathedral has now reopened for in-person worships every Sunday, with masks required due to the pandemic.
Mississippi is dealing with one of the worst CCP virus surges it's had so far. Recently, the state's renewed an order saying Mississippians should isolate if they test positive. Those who don't could be fined or even isolated behind bars. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Mississippi has renewed a severe isolation order. If you test positive for COVID-19, you need to isolate. If you don't, expect a fine or jail time.
This is not a new order. This is an order that we released back in 2020. This was a reissue of the same order that's been out there to remind individuals of the seriousness of COVID, and that if you are infected, the best way to limit transmission is to isolate yourself, is to keep yourself away from other individuals.
The order says COVID-19 positive Mississippians need to isolate for 10 days. This includes K-12 students who must be excluded from class to isolate. Violators face up to $5,000 fines, 5 years in jail, or both. We don't know how many people have already violated this order and others like it. Neither the governor's office nor the attorney general have gotten back to us. Now, there will be exceptions.
And certainly there can be exceptions for seeking treatment, and that's part of the process.
Mississippi's undergoing another surge, one of the worst surges yet. The highest daily positive cases and hospitalizations with COVID-19 they've reported in the pandemic. And the vast majority of people testing positive, being hospitalized, and dying are not vaccinated or partially vaccinated. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
You remember those vaccine lotteries that a few states held to ramp up vaccinations? Well, the last checks have been passed out in Michigan, but those millions of dollars weren't as enticing as they hoped for. We have the governor's response.
Congratulations, Christine!
Thank you. That's Christine Duvall, the winner of a $2 million check, one of Michigan's vaccine lottery prizes. About $5 million in cash and scholarships were given to lucky people who got the shot in July. Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer says it went well.
Thanks to the efforts of so many and every Michigander who got their shot, the My Shot to Win sweepstakes has been a success.
But they missed their mark by more than half. The state aimed to raise the vaccination rate by about 9% to reach a state vaccination total of 70%. However, those $5 million weren't as enticing as they hoped for, only bumping up the total in July by about 2%. Surprisingly, more people were vaccinated the month before without the lottery. Not by a lot, but still more. One of the scholarship winners told officials why he got vaccinated.
I got vaccinated because, well, my mom, as mentioned earlier, has MS, and getting the vaccine would make me be able to, protect her from any other thing besides what she's going through right now, and protecting everyone around me. So, yeah, it was good getting the vaccine.
There were dozens of other winners. Michigan says the lottery prizes were paid for with a portion of the coronavirus relief funds from the federal government. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Coming up, a California judge declares a mistrial in a court case against Michael Avenatti. The lawyer is charged with embezzling millions of dollars from his clients. And aircraft maker Boeing receives a letter from the Federal Aviation Administration. The agency is looking into whether the company's employees are being pressured on safety issues. All that and more here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
Are you looking for a news source that does not spin the truth, doesn't push any false narratives, and instead presents you with the facts and lets you make up your own mind? Then go to readepic.com and try the Epic Times newspaper for yourself. It's pure honest journalism that's based in traditional values.
Stoked by dry, heavy winds, the Caldor fire in Northern California grew further out of control on Tuesday. Authorities now fear it could threaten the popular Lake Tahoe area. Here are the details. A time-lapse video shot by the Armstrong Lookout fire camera showed plumes of smoke billowing from the blaze. Firefighters are struggling to contain the fire, which started on August 14th, south of Pollock Pines. Since then, it has burned through over 117,000 acres of land and destroyed more than 600 structures. Some 24,000 people have been evacuated, and at least 2 people have been injured. As of Monday evening, fire officials said the fire was just 9% contained. California's drought-stricken timber, brush, and grasslands have created a potent fuel bed for several wildfires raging across the region. The state is already on pace to see more of its landscape go up in flames this year than last, and 2020 was the worst year on record. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is investigating 2 outbreaks of Salmonella across 17 states. Both are linked to Italian-style meats. Those include meats like salami and prosciutto, and other meats found in antipasto or charcuterie assortments. So far, 36 cases have been reported, and 12 people have been hospitalized. The number of sickened people is likely higher because many people who get Salmonella recover without seeking medical treatment. No deaths have been reported. The CDC is working to determine what meat brands are affected and if both outbreaks came from the same source. On Tuesday, a California judge declared a mistrial in the embezzlement trial of attorney Michael Avenatti. The attorney was previously found guilty of trying to extort millions of dollars from Nike.
United States District Judge James Selna announced a mistrial on technical grounds in Michael Avenatti's embezzlement case. Avenatti is charged with stealing millions in settlement money from his clients. The judge ruled that federal prosecutors failed to turn over relevant financial evidence to Avenatti, who is representing himself in the case. Another hearing is set for September 2nd, and Judge Selna scheduled a new trial date for October 12th. This was the second trial for Avenatti in recent months. He previously represented adult film actress Stormy Daniels in her lawsuit against then-President Donald Trump, after which the lawyer quickly rose to fame. In July, Avenatti was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison after he was found guilty of a $25 million extortion case against Nike.
The FAA is investigating if Boeing employees are being pressured on safety issues. The agency sent a letter to the aircraft maker. Investigators want to know if Boeing interferes with employees tasked with flagging safety problems with planes. These workers oversee safety functions during the design and construction of an aircraft. The FAA says it conducted a study with some of them and received responses from 35% that indicate their work environment does not support independence. Boeing says it's working with the FAA to make sure its employees have the required independence. The company's process has attracted new interest since nearly 350 people died in 2 Boeing 737 MAX plane crashes back in 2018 and 2019. Vice President Kamala Harris kicked off her Vietnam visit today. During a meeting in the capital, Hanoi, she called on Vietnam to join the U.S. in challenging China's bullying in the South China Sea. Here's more.
Vice President Kamala Harris held a bilateral meeting with Vietnam's top leaders during her visit to the country. Speaking to the Vietnamese president, Harris noted the need to counter Beijing's increasing assertiveness in the South China Sea.
We need to find ways to pressure and raise the pressure, frankly, on Beijing to abide by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and to challenge its bullying and excessive maritime claims.
In a briefing, Harris called for an end to the violence and military coup in Burma or Myanmar. She also pledged that the U.S. would provide another 1 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to Vietnam. The country is now grappling with surging infections while vaccination rates remain low. Harris also announced the launch of a new Southeast Asia office for the U.S. CDC. The vice president is currently on the second stop of her week-long Asia trip after concluding a 3-day visit to Singapore.
The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is retaliating against a Malaysian singer after he posted online mocking the regime's authoritarian rule and comparing it to the Taliban.
A social media post titled 8 Tips for the Taliban made a splash in China last week. The post's author, a Malaysian singer, appears to be comparing the Chinese regime's totalitarian rule to that of the Taliban. But it didn't take too long for Chinese authorities to take notice. They quickly suspended his account on Weibo, a popular Chinese social media platform. The post ironically proposes what the Taliban must do to hold on to power in Afghanistan. But the steps outlined exactly match Beijing's tactics for maintaining control. The post first suggests that the Taliban block foreign websites like Facebook, YouTube, and Google. Then it advises setting up Taliban-run news websites and social media apps. That's so citizens will only have access to news produced by the Taliban, with no outside information or influence. The post also ironically proposes establishing concentration camps and black jails. These suggestions echo many of the Chinese regime's strategies that have been in play for years, from its internet censorship firewall to its persecution of prisoners of conscience, to its suppression of ethnic minorities in China's northwestern Xinjiang region. But the post doesn't stop there. Next is that the Taliban should create a giant statue of its leader and place it at the gates of the presidential palace. That's on top of putting up slogans in the streets and brainwashing students through their schools. During China's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, authorities came up with an endless stream of propaganda slogans. At the same time, China also saw a nationwide trend of building statues idolizing former communist leader Mao Zedong. What's more, the post advises the Taliban to urge citizens to attack criticism of authorities online, a prospect that bears a striking resemblance to China's so-called 50-cent army, a group of state-backed internet users paid to praise Beijing and its policies online, while attacking anyone who questioned or criticized the regime. What more does the Taliban need to do? According to the post, it should pay foreigners to sing patriotic songs about Afghanistan and make patriotic movies. While in China, two films called Wolf Warrior 2 and Operation Red Sea swept the country's box office in recent years and received massive attention on social media.
Still to come, an exhibit showcases 30 years of Ukrainian independence. Ukraine achieved its latest status as an independent state after the fall of the Soviet Union. Lawyers in Belarus are seeing restrictions on who they can defend and what they can say about the government. Some have had to leave the country. Stay tuned to find out more.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Yesterday marked the 30th anniversary of Ukraine gaining independence from the Soviet Union. To celebrate the occasion, 20 art institutions come together with a special exhibition. Let's take a look.
The Forever Free Ukraine exhibition features 250 items covering the period from 1914 to 1923. 20 institutions have presented exhibits, while the Ukrainian National Museum of Chicago presented most of the U.S. exhibits.
The exhibits have been presented from American and Ukraine museums, libraries, and archives. This is the first time that such a large-scale exhibition of these objects has been presented in one place.
Потужний масивний пласт експонатів зібраний під єдиним дахом в одній надзвичайно цікавій виставці.
In mid-August 1991, hardline communists in Moscow attempted a coup against Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. But immediately after it failed, Ukraine declared its sovereignty. Many of the 15 former Soviet republics did the same.
Розпадається в 91-му році Варшавський блок в Україні.
The Warsaw Bloc broke down in 1991. Then there were the processes and discussions after which the blue and yellow flag was raised in Kiev City Hall. On 24th of August 1991, there was a proclamation of independence.
Before that, the last time Ukraine existed as an independent state was briefly from 1917 to 1920. That followed the chaos in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution and World War I. It wasn't until the collapse of the Soviet Union at the end of 1991 that Ukraine officially became independent again.
Тут люди в кінці 80-х розуміють, що
People in the late 80s understood that except jeans and gum, which you could get by shadowing foreigners near hotels, there were so many things connected to freedom of movement, freedom of speech, purchasing of food.
One of the items is on display for the first time, an album of Ukrainian army uniforms. It was created in Prague in 1937 and traveled via Germany during World War II to the post-war United States. The exhibition runs until September 30th.
Rights lawyers in Belarus are facing increasing pressure. That's according to several lawyers who say their lives have been turned upside down after they spoke out against the authorities or defended those who have.
Belarusian authorities have been cracking down on dissidents. They've targeted opposition politicians, journalists, and now apparently lawyers. Mikhail Kyrylyuk was a lawyer in the former Soviet state. He defended anti-government protesters and publicly criticized President Alexander Lukashenko's rule. Then in October, he said he received a tip-off from a KGB affiliate telling him to flee.
This person wrote me that my license will be revoked, and then Belarusian authorities will arrest me, not as an attorney at law, but as a former attorney at law.
38-year-old Kyrylyuk quickly fled to Poland with his parents and children. His account fits with what more than half a dozen Belarusian lawyers say is a pattern of intimidation and suppression of attorneys by authorities. 7 lawyers interviewed by Reuters say their licenses were removed after defending protesters or speaking out against authorities. Many of them allege that authorities monitored confidential client meetings or obstructed their work. Like Kyrylyuk, former lawyer Anton Gushinsky also had his license terminated.
The all-seeing eye sees everything, observes, systematizes, accumulates information, and then makes procedural decisions. We can easily turn from a subject of criminal proceedings into an object.
Reuters could not independently corroborate their assertions or the tip-off described by Kyrylyuk, and Lukashenko's office did not respond to requests for comment. At least 23 Belarusian lawyers have been disbarred since last summer, according to the International Federation for Human Rights. The Justice Ministry said it has the power to terminate legal licenses in circumstances stipulated by law. It added that a number of lawyers had lost their licenses this year because they had committed, quote, gross violations of licensing legislation. A new law approved by Lukashenko in June stipulates that only candidates approved by the Justice Ministry can practice law. Some attorneys say that is intended to control their profession. Sergei Ustinov is a member of Belarusian human rights organization, The Legal Initiative.
Before August 2020, the rules of the game were clear and some legal mechanisms worked. There was no obvious torture in relation to political prisoners. Now we see the complete legal lawlessness in Belarus. The concept of law does not exist in principle.
On the Normandy beaches in France, the World War II bunkers are slowly disappearing with the passage of time. Some are removed by local officials, while some are half buried in the sand. One bunker had a different fate, though. A local man decided to restore it and turn it into an Airbnb rental. Let's take a look.
It's impossible to miss these bunkers when walking along the Normandy beaches. Every 100 yards, these concrete shelters are one of the only physical remains left of what happened here 76 years ago. On the morning of June 6, 1944, 156,000 troops landed in Normandy, including 78,000 American soldiers. As time passes, some of the bunkers have become eroded or half buried in the sand, like this one that once operated as a radar station to detect planes. But one bunker seems to have found a new life. Step by step, Serge Collieu, a bunker enthusiast, bought up a plot of land in the area and spent 18 months digging out and renovating the 4,300 square foot bunker.
It mostly was difficult for the craftsmen. The digger especially had a lot of work. the electrician as well. Otherwise, we did everything ourselves.
The bunker has been turned into a fully functioning rental, complete with a bar area and cozy living room. It's now a home away from home for French visitors and foreigners, including Germans.
We adapted the bunker while preserving a certain feel. We wanted to give the building a second life, so we are not going to live in the past forever.
The site, now in a residential area and surrounded by houses and gardens, close to the coast, was once operated by 30 men in the German Air Force, or Luftwaffe. While some local mayors have advocated to remove the bunkers, as they can occasionally pose a danger to bathers, some guests and residents want to preserve them.
It is a moment of our history, of the history of humanity, and it is a bit sad to want to destroy all this. On the contrary, it holds memories. Our grandparents have lived through this. My parents did too.
Nods to the war are present throughout the space, with memorabilia like helmets and reproductions of guns. Although Caldor said he did not want to go overboard to allow guests to enjoy it for parties too. According to an author and specialist, though some Normandy bunkers are to disappear with time, there is an ongoing trend to preserve them and have their history remembered.
Serena Williams has withdrawn from next week's U.S. Open. She says her torn hamstring has not healed completely ahead of the final Grand Slam of the year. Williams is a 6-time winner at the tournament, and the 39-year-old has been on the hunt for her 24th major win, but she has struggled with injuries all season. She limped out of her first-round match at Wimbledon in tears. She skipped the Olympics in Tokyo and also missed the Cincinnati Masters. She says that she is listening to her doctors and wants to give her body time completely to heal. Williams is the latest big name to pull out of the tournament. Men's tennis champs Dominic Thiem and Rafael Nadal both ended their 2021 season early due to injuries. Sometimes life can overwhelm us, leaving no other option than to trust that something greater is in play. Let's hear more about facing the peaks and troughs of life on the next segment, Strong Mind and Body.
Welcome to Strong Mind and Body. I'm Gina Marie. Life on Earth is made up of a series of peaks and valleys, trials and victories. Fighting against the ebb and flow of what is beyond our control is as exhausting and futile as trying to manipulate the ocean's tide. What will be, and there is very little over which we have control. Life's punches hit out of nowhere, upsetting normal routines and predictability. Loved ones die and leave us in a state of shock and bereavement. Sickness strikes, interrupting the best laid plans. Cars and appliances break down, forcing expensive repair or replacement. Jobs are lost due to downsizing, outsourcing, or other reasons beyond the scope of our preferences and decisions. Relationships end regardless of how much we don't want them to. Such is life. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said, "Into each life some rain must fall." Sometimes it's more than some rain. Sometimes it's a flood, and none of us wields the power to control the intensity of the downpour. Since these things are inevitable, the things that matter most is how we choose to respond to them. Here are some things to consider when life delivers a deluge and you find yourself outside in rainy season. Start by accepting reality. Don't overcomplicate the obvious. Even though we would prefer to pretend the storm isn't raging, false pretense will never alter the truth. As acceptance settles into our hearts and minds, internal peace will come despite external circumstances. Acceptance removes the inward struggle and is beautifully conducive to a simple life. Accept limitations. Coming to terms with the fact that what is happening is beyond our own power to remedy will not take the pain away, but it will relieve and lift unnecessary feelings of responsibility. Sometimes we just can't change or fix things, and yet we may discover we were never meant to. Discovering the truth is liberating. Accept contentment. Believe that the pieces are falling into place according to a design far greater than your own. Don't try to reopen closed chapters. They were closed for reasons beyond what you can see. Don't continue to try to walk through closed doors. Move on. Trust that all things are working together for your good and changes were necessary. Don't fight against the plan. Relax and rest in the knowledge that things are happening exactly as they should be.
A hippo named Uma has just turned 47 years old. She celebrated her birthday with her 6-year-old grandson named Timothy with a splash in the pool. These hippos call the San Antonio Zoo home. Video shared on social media on August 10th showed Uma and Timothy crushing watermelon, cantaloupe, and apples underwater. The San Antonio Zoo said the hippos received some special enrichment, including a watermelon cake and various fruits in and around their pool. From what we can tell, the birthday treat was a smashing success. Thanks for watching. At NTD, we're honored to be your source for the news. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.